Is he in the front or back?
Call this workshop to order. Having convened today, this is a workshop in regards to our budget process. We are duly assembled, and I am going to ask, since Mark Hopper's got a mouthful of water, Karim, if you will, to give us an invocation for our lunch and a blessing for the rest of the afternoon, please, sir.
Just invocation?
Yes.
Okay. Let us pray. Dear Father God, we thank you for this time we get to share together just to talk about city business. Lord, we ask you just to dwell amongst us. Lord, we ask you just to continue to cover everything that we do in the city of Greer. Continue to be with all our citizens, all the ones that get to reap the benefits of all the things that the city of Greer has to offer to this town, Father. Lord, we ask you for the food that we were able to partake in. Let it be a nourishment to our bodies and our bodies to your service, Father. And as Lord, it's in your name we do pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Andy is at the podium and ready to go, but I am going to exercise some executive privilege here in terms of starting this workshop, and I think that it is appropriate, possibly needed in some regard, and some information that I hope that you will find pertinent to this exercise that we are starting today and going to continue over the next 3 weeks. One of our fellow council members, said, "Well, this is different than we have done in the past," and to some degree, it is. And I think we need to acknowledge that, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you prior to jumping into the deep end of the pool of budgeting, and so. Just for reference, I have got some comments that I want to make, some points about how this is all going to go down, and give you an overview of where I hope that we're going to wind up, since this may be the first time that you have done this, or like two of us, the 25th time. Riley and I are alumni of the longest council meeting in Greer's history. It was a line-by-line exam of a proposed budget, first reading, that was balanced, but built on a proposed draconian cut in spending, personnel, programming, promotions, pay raises, insurance, building maintenance, facility maintenance, vehicle maintenance, you name it. And at some point, well into the night, as best I recall, probably 1:30, 2 o'clock, we had hoped that we had made enough adjustments to move forward on at least the first reading of the budget. As the meeting came to a close, Mr. Driggers, Ed Driggers, our city administrator at the time, stated, "Council, the only thing that you have not reviewed this evening is how many bullets we need to order for the police department." It was quickly dubbed the bullet budget. After several years of austere budgeting, we found our feet on the ground, and growth was providing a cushion for future planning. By the time Jay came along to serve on this board, we were discussing creating a reserve fund. We had definitely gotten our feet on the ground, so to speak. Now, as we consider my 26th budget, I feel qualified to say a thing or two about municipal taxation and budgeting. I realize that not everyone at the table will agree with me on some counts, but that's fine. I'm simply sharing lessons learned over the past 25 budgets. Municipal budgeting and for-profit business budgeting at their very core have different objectives. Municipalities provide services to manage public resources for the citizens of the municipality, while businesses budget to maximize profitability for owners and shareholders. Remember that about 60% of this budget goes to providing services, i.e. employees. Municipalities also use fund accounts where moving money is segregated into funds and can't be shifted around between funds like in a business. This restricts how money can be spent. Business can shift funds between departments and oftentimes does that based on needs, strategic priorities, and to boost performance. Municipal budgeting is legally mandated, should be transparent and focus on spending within strict spending limits, whereas business budgeting can be voluntary, private, focused on revenue growth, and sometimes even cost controls. By state law, the administrator, manager, or strong mayor is responsible for presenting a budget to council. By legislative action, council then is tasked with passing a balanced budget. Between those two actions, there are a number of scenarios that can transpire. Workshops, like we have today, give councils an opportunity to hear how the budget was constructed, how departments crafted their budget, how they determined their needs, and possibly even share their wants. Council can question, request additional information, discuss needs versus wants, and discuss strategic initiatives. What we won't do in our workshops is to vote on anything. That will come at the first reading. I hope that we will share our thoughts and ideas because an astute administrator, manager, should be able to read a council and make adjustments, changes, and updates to the budgets to be discussed at the first reading, where council members can request a change through the legislative process. On a personal note, I want to share a couple of things just as housekeeping matters with you as well, too. Our staff is very friendly and will be happy to accommodate requests for information during this budget process as well as any other time. I would simply like to remind council that the deputy administrator and assistant administrators, as well as department heads and all employees, report directly to the city administrator and not to us. If you need information, please contact the administrator who will direct your request to the most appropriate and possibly the person who can satisfy the request quickest. If you go directly to someone other than the administrator, they will need to seek his approval before proceeding, also requesting that the information be shared with the other members of the council for full transparency. If you simply need a quick number, a figure or a stat, a date, feel free to call Andy or the department head if you're just looking for simple information. The administrator presents the budget he feels best suited for the city and staff. But one of the things that we've got to remember is that 1 + 1 is not equal to 2 in a municipal budget. Given that only 50% of our income comes from ad valorem taxes, the rest is a combination of licenses, fees, forfeitures, state fines, programming fees, and et cetera. It includes accommodations fees, hospitality fees, public service fees, the garbage fee, stormwater fees, impact fees, et cetera. Remember, many of these fees cannot be commingled with general funds, so when we start looking at wanting to make changes, you only truly have about 50% of the total budget to work from. It is almost impossible to try and reduce a budget of our size by trimming multiple line items. If you want to find $2 million in savings, pick one or possibly two items to cut drastically or to zero out altogether. It's much easier to rip the Band-Aid off than to bleed to death by 1,000 nicks. Preparing a budget is one of the most, The administrator presents the budget he feels is best suited for the needs of the city and the staff, and this process generally takes several months of preparation. fact gathering, revenue projections, debt reviews, equipment and facility needs, staffing needs, employee benefits, and much more. Preparing the budget is the most basic tenet of an administrator's duties, so it is never taken lightly. As you can imagine, there have been over 25 years that we have been budgeting, and Andy has much more experience than that. We have to examine items and issues that we disagree about and maybe not support. But we can never question that the basis or the intent of a budget submitted to us was done so knowing that it was done in the best interest of the city. I can't imagine anyone submitting a budget that wasn't in the best interest of the city as a whole. While we may philosophically feel different about the structure or funding of a budget, I don't know of any administrator that would intentionally risk his name, reputation, or career by submitting a budget that is balanced, that is anything other than balanced. Intentionally or physically, they are typically physically conservative and is based on what is in the best interest of all of our citizens of the city. Nevertheless, I also don't know an administrator who doesn't know how to read the tea leaves of a council or is not flexible enough to make adjustments based on the wishes of a majority of council. The last thing I want to share this evening is our view of how this budget may go as we move through it. I know that there is some concern about millage. One of the things that I think we need to be aware of is that if we are given the option of cutting our salary or cutting our house payment, which one would we take? We probably wouldn't cut our salary. That's equivalent to our taxes. The appraised value, a house appraised with a value of $200,000, if we reduce 2 mills, we'll save them $16 a year. It's $32 a year for a $400,000 home. And at a 6% rate, a $300,000 home would be a $36 savings. If we are intent on making things more affordable for our community, it would be better to look at reducing a fee and or other measures to make up this fee and to make it more equal across our community. District 2, District 1, possibly some of District 5, all probably share a minimal amount of taxation, and getting a small amount back would always be welcomed, but there's an opportunity for us to look at other means of providing relief to what our citizens pay other than the millage. With that, I know we were getting ready to jump into a review of revenue for the coming year. I appreciate you making time for these next sessions and for the discussion that will take place as we move towards crafting a budget for our entire city. I think it is appropriate as well, too, that we thank not only the administrator, but our entire staff and department heads that are going to participate in this process as well. As I mentioned earlier, this has been an ongoing process for the last several months, and we appreciate the work that has gone into that. With that, the floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much. Yes, it is a different process than we've done in the past, and the intent of this process is almost, from an educational standpoint, to reset a little bit, to refresh some existing council members on our revenue, and as we focus on today's meeting, but also some new council members kind of do a finance, budgeting, taxation, debt 101. Which is why I've got some experts in-house that I'll introduce in a little more detail later. But today is, to the mayor's point, specifically focused on revenue. This is what the framework by which we built the budget. And so we're going to go through our budget line by line, or at least account by account for y'all today, so you can see where our money comes from, where we've had growth, or how that money's over the last 5 years. We're going to talk about all those things. We're going to get into millage, we're going to get into debt service requirements, and then we're going to talk about the projections. So what you're going to see, the beginning of this presentation is the last 5 years of revenue in those accounts. So we're not going to talk about revenue projections until the end of the presentation, okay? Again, this is an iterative process, so if you have any questions throughout this, please jump in and let's just keep it conversational.
Are you going to be sharing this presentation?
This presentation will be available to everyone in council. And just by another quick housekeeping point, the budget books are here. We will hand those out to council after this presentation, and we will make sure you have this presentation. But everything that you see in this presentation is in those books. Okay. The presentation is not, but the information is. Let's talk about the budget timeline itself. February to March is the intra-departmental meetings. I want to talk briefly about what that means. Specifically in departments like public services and engineering, they rely heavily on cartograph software, and it really tracks not only man hours but equipment usage. So when we say that this is intra-departmental, it's a ground up process. So and you'll see through this as Travis starts developing his budget for public services, it doesn't just come from nowhere. It comes from data. Most of these budgets are truly data driven. What do we need? What do we need for the upcoming year? Are we adding a new facility? What will that require, et cetera? So between February and March, the departments really kind of huddle up with their leadership and figure out what it is that they're going to need to operate on an annual basis. It then goes and it's uploaded into Chris's world, and Chris starts doing all the magic with OpenGov and reconciling not only what has been submitted, but also starting looking at some of the things that we know we're going to be doing, like paying people. Those salary things are added, and those knowns are put in there. And then the team goes to work on the budget line by line by line. So this is the budget team. Obviously, you know me, you know Mike, but and Katrina. Reno this is his first real jump into the budget process as an assistant administrator. Chris, of course, is our finance department head, and then Tamar Kirksey, who really kind of works in the background from an accounting perspective to kind of make sure that all this stuff is pulled together. So this team, me excluded from the detail work, they go through this and meet with every department, and they go line by line by line by line, asking those necessary questions. Why do you need this? What has it been used for? This is a little different than last year. What's going on here? All departments that submitted all budgets, they went through line by line. Then we come together and I meet with them and I kind of reconcile everything with, to the mayor's point, what I know of as the tea leaves, is what I think this council hopes to see in a budget, what we know has happened in the past, meeting council's priorities, et cetera. What you will get today is our balanced budget presented to council for your consideration. I also have with us today to talk a little bit about our debt and millage, Michael Kozlarek. For those of you who don't know Michael, he's our bond attorney and has been with us for a number of years now. He's with King Kozlarek Root, just a great guy, but also a very talented and well-respected bond attorney and municipal attorney throughout the state. And then, of course, Brent Robertson, you saw him last Tuesday night as the financial advisor for CPW, but he's been the city's FA for a little over 3 years now. And so they're here to kind of add some color commentary to how revenue is used, specifically when we get into millage. Brent will jump into discussions about debt, how we modeled that plan of finance for the City of Greer initiative, but he's also going to talk some about the lease purchase process too, which some of y'all it's going to be new to you.
Is Brent is he related to Peyton Manning? Looks just like him in that picture.
I did get out of a parking ticket once because the state highway patrolman said I looked like that. So autograph sessions will be later. First table out front.
I was just getting ready to text you, you ought to use something other than your mugshot though.
Well, let's jump into the revenue sources, okay? And the way we're gonna approach this presentation is we're gonna talk about our minor revenue sources. We're gonna talk about restricted funds and what that means. Then we're gonna kind of segue a little bit into the growth of the city as we've seen it over the past 5 to 10 years. And we're gonna talk about our major funds, and we're gonna go through each one of those. Again, ask any questions. Mike, Katrina, Chris are here to provide any color commentary that are necessary or answer any clarifying questions. Fund 50, facility rentals. Again, these are minor funds, but they are sources of revenue that are coded specifically under those funds. Under facility rentals, you see, again, City Hall, City Park. So when this facility is rented out, that dumps into Fund 50. When we do things that need more, Tryon, Center for the Arts, all of that gets dumped into Fund 50. Just to show you a little bit over the years of where we've come from a revenues perspective, you're going to see some asterisks on the 2026. Obviously, we're not at the end of 26 yet, so those numbers could fluctuate. But where we're projecting them now, we are seeing revenue is steadily increasing from year over year. Some of it's a little more aggressive, some of it not. But rental income, security fees, interest payments, et cetera, that kind of gives you the last 5 years of trajectory on our facility rentals. Again, these are minor funds.
Let me ask about the asterisk. This is anticipated rental income 2026, or is this current
This is
today?
actual, yes, sir.
Actual.
This is today?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Actually, it would be, what would it be, the April numbers, wouldn't it?
No, this is pretty recent,
This
as
is-
of just,
As of last week? Okay, good. There you go. Which leaves 2 months left in the fiscal year. Special funds, again, and these are, the reason I'm pointing out these as minor funds, you're looking at this, okay, well, $70,000, what are we talking about? Well, they are still separate minor funds. In Fund 9, which is Recreation Fund, you're gonna see small grants that pop up for things like advertising in a periodical that is a tourism journal or something along those lines. That's how we code those dollars. Interesting enough, pay attention to Fund 23. You're going to see a big jump in that as we talk about projections at the end of the year because of a grant. But again, just trying to paint a little bit of a picture on the difference in our funds. I'll have these funds outlined for you, obviously, in the budget book, but as we go farther into the presentation, you'll see more about the differences in our funds. Fund 11. Fund 11 is an important one to remember. That's the general fund. That is the general fund. So if we reference 11 and we do it, if Chris does it in some kind of knee-jerk accounting vernacular, Fund 11 is the general fund. But in that, we have grant revenue over the last 5 years that, and you can see it. Bulletproof vests, for instance, come into that one. School district SRO grants. Those are the ones that the state provides us grant money to put SROs in schools to offset that mandate. We'll get state law enforcement grants for various reasons. All of that stuff can be outlined for you in greater detail as necessary. But again, this is to talk about those specific types of revenues that are coming in. This one's specific to Fund 11. Fund 9, athletic fund. So when someone signs their kid up for basketball or football or whatever, this is where that money goes. You can see the list of things that we've offered or will be offering in the year to come, volleyball being a new one. Those dollars go into the athletic fund. 5-year look back on all of that stuff kind of gives you an idea that over in 2026, we're projecting probably to meet our budget for 465, 470. I think we budget for 470, I think, for this fiscal year. Again, this is how we account for those revenues. Now remember, these are minor funds, they're not restricted funds. So we will get into those restricted funds here soon.
So those go, although they're different funds, they're still part of the general fund.
these are part of Fund 09, the recreation fund, right here.
They're not restricted in the sense of, I have a stormwater fee, it has to go to that.
Right.
We keep them in those funds, but yes, it doesn't have the legal restrictions. Those are your effective restrictions. Rear Golf, Fund 57. This is how we calculate everything that goes into Fund 57, membership dues, green fees, everything that comes into the golf course, we reconcile and keep in the golf course. We're trying our best to run that like an enterprise fund, run it like the business it is. This is just example of the things that would go into that. This is over the last 5 years. It kind of shows how we've been doing from an income or revenue standpoint in the golf course with all of those pieces. And as you can see, and as y'all know anecdotally, for some of y'all that have been out there, unless you're a member, you can't get a tee time anymore. We are gangbusters out there. And the investment this council made in the previous years, not only in purchasing the course, but in the upkeep of the fairways, the investment we made in the clubhouse and what was the old pool area is paying off dividends. And then of course, White Wine and Butter being our restaurant out there is doing well as our restaurant. General fund minor revenues, again, this is other things that jump into fines and forfeitures. You know, there's the old adage of, well, you know, they're writing me speeding tickets, so all that money can come into their coffers. Well, that's not exactly the case. Fire fees, grants, and other miscellaneous revenues that will come in all account for minor funds in the general fund.
Fire fees, that's
Those are
the Greenville County Fire District and the West Spartanburg County.
that, you know, what is it called, Chris? The Greer Fire District, and then the Spartan.
But that's what it is.
Yes, sir.
East Greer,
Yeah, East Greer, East Greer, yeah.
all those fees.
Yep. Paving, if you'll recall, a number of years ago, we set aside $1.5 million, I believe, to go directly to paving and infrastructure. We used that to maximize our service on roads and sidewalks, but then, as you can see, this is the revenue we received from Greenville County road fees, Spartanburg County taxes, Greenville auto fees, et cetera. And we budget those funds annually to obviously address our infrastructure. Let's talk about restricted revenues. Like I mentioned before, these are specifically set aside for a purpose, and they can't be rated. They can't be moved into the general fund. They are set aside to meet certain criteria. Stormwater fund, way back when, was part of the Clean Water Act, and I believe it was probably, Mike may remember, about 2006, 2005 is when it really became incumbent upon local governments to start managing their stormwater and the quality of water as a result. What's the acronym, Mike? MS4. MS4, yes. That's when those MS4 requirements came in, and they were tiered by population and when you had to become compliant. Those and I think that started 05, 06 timeframe. So this is to be compliant with the Clean Water Act. We charge a fee for every equivalent residential unit that goes into our stormwater account. You'll see it as part of our comprehensive fee schedule, which you pass as part of the budget. Y'all can adjust it as necessary. And all of that is outlined in ordinance, and it has to be deposited in the Stormwater Enterprise Fund and only used for stormwater purposes. This is just to kind of give you an idea of what the base fee for these plan reviews and how we identify them as from an equivalent residential unit. That's what makes up the stormwater fee. This is kind of give you the last 5 years of what we've done in the way of collections in stormwater. Talk about A-tax. So we are governed by the state, and we have a local ordinance on how we collect and utilize accommodations tax. As you can see, it's not to exceed 3% of the total. We actually are the 2% rate for A-tax, so we do not charge the entire 3%. It's applied from rental of rooms, campground spaces, lodging, and sleeping accommodations. It's enacted by a local ordinance, and then those proceeds must be kept separate. So we collect those A-tax dollars, and y'all, we just had this exercise 2 meetings ago, where this council considered the committee's recommendations and awarded those grants to to the applicants that it warranted. Hospitality tax is a tax on the sale of prepared meals and beverages sold in establishment, or sales of prepared meals and beverages sold in establishments licensed for on-premise consumption of alcoholic beverages, beer, or wine. So that's the H-tax fund and how that is collected. As you can see, it's a cumulative rate not to exceed the 2% on any given tax receipt, or on any prepared food or alcohol receipt. This is how we can use both of them. They're very similar in use. Tourism-related buildings, tourism-related cultural, recreational, historic facilities, beach access, highway, roads, streets, bridges, providing access to tourist destinations. Advertising, which is a separate component that you approved in the last 2 meetings ago. Water and sewer infrastructure, development of workforce housing. Oddly enough, that can go into workforce housing. And so again, just kind of give you an idea of why that's a restricted use and what it's restricted for. To kind of give you an idea of that breakdown where we've combined the two of them, we're seeing an average increase of 11% over the last 5 years in that revenue. And I project short of some national calamity, those numbers will continue to increase. I believe it was Mr. Bettis or someone at some point a number of years ago, we talked about this, and it was referenced, I think the analogy was apt, because it's kind of like walking uphill with a yo-yo. You know, it's going to go up and down a little bit, but it's going to continue to go uphill. And I think in this particular case, we're going to continue to see that in both our accommodations and hospitality tax revenue. Accommodations tax there's a world of opportunity there for further collections. You know, we've talked about with the onset of the Sports and Event Center and the topping out ceremony we had yesterday, we are 9 months away from this thing really taking off and opening its doors for the first tournaments. And we will see, I believe, accommodations taxes continue to increase over the years.
Sorry, can I point out
Please.
one? FY '26 on this one, to your question earlier, Mr. Leonard, this is the only one where I did do a projection. We currently, actuals right now are about 3.3. I did budget what we should be getting. We have 2 more months of collections. So that's what I anticipate we will be at the end of this fiscal year. That's the only year I did, for FY '26, where I did do a projection.
Thank you. Impact fees in October of
Andy,
2020.
quick
Yes, sir.
question. When we're talking about accommodations and hospitality tax, you know, we talk about accommodations a lot here at council. How can we lump the two together when we reference it? We always say accommodations and hospitality, but when we actually allocate it here, we only look at the accommodations portion. Is there any reason why we kind of lump those two together? It's kind of they're not interchangeable, you know, and they're 2 separate numbers.
So that accommodation that we do in the form of a grant that we did, that was actually, those were accommodations from the state. And so that is what we have to give out in the form of a grant per our ordinance that we have been doing. Here specifically in Fund 18, that includes both our local and our local accommodations, not what we receive through the state.
So when,
Where are the local accommodations? I mean, do they go into the hospitality?
They do.
so when Chris was talking, so when we had that meeting, you remember we get the first 40,000 gets peeled off the top, dropped into the general fund, which makes this a little bit swirly sometimes because yes, it's a restricted fund, but the state law allows us to take 40,000 of that and drop it in the general fund, which then is not restricted. But in general, the accommodations tax is a restricted fund. But to that point is that from a formula standpoint, your question about its interchangeability comes because the allowed uses are very similar in both, but the grant program itself is specified under state code for accommodations tax, and that's the exercise that y'all go through. You're gonna see most of our hospitality tax, when we look at debt, is tied up in debt service. So it's the A-tax money that, I don't wanna call it mad money, but that's the money that y'all get to grant.
Yeah.
Another observation here is pretty steady trend. So looking at about a $500,000 increase from 21 to 22, $500,000, 22, 23, 200 grand next year, 200 grand next year, 100 grand this year. Is that a trend that's gonna, what do you think the reasons for that trend is?
from a speculative standpoint on why it's flattened to the degree it's flattened, I would just go as far as to say that in that time period, we've just seen some inflationary pressures that have probably come to bear on people just going out.
Okay. But this is,
That's speculative on my part, and I imagine there's probably some science behind it, but my immediate reaction is that's what it is.
That's the flattening, you're saying.
That's the flattening, is the inflationary pressures that,
Increase themselves, right?
It's a double.
no, the flattening.
The flattening.
So the other thing that this is, both of these are, for lack of a better word, burdens on our business community, right?
no, it's a pass-through tax. No, so when I go to eat, it's on my bill that I'm paying that percent that goes into hospitality tax. All that, Zaxby's is doing is taking my money and giving it to
Yeah.
so it's not a burden on them.
Okay, so the
It's a
business.
pass-through.
community
No, it does
welcomes
not,
this.
yeah, does not impact that.
Paid by the consumer, by whoever's.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
paid for the
Yes, sir.
consumer, but I guess the point I'm trying to get to is part of this flattening out, some of the businesses have been closing that we've been seeing lately.
I think it's more like what Mr. Merriman was saying about, it's an inflationary, it acts as a double-edged sword. Obviously, as prices increase for how much it costs to buy a
Yeah.
meal, drives down people going because the prices are higher, but because the price is higher, the 2% we collect is higher.
Yeah,
So it's kind of that, I think the leveling out or the flattening is just that double-edged part where prices go up, but the people purchasing at that price level goes down a
Goes
little
down,
bit as well.
yeah.
And then that's when you have to figure in inflation and what's in that number. But I will say the hospitality tax, that's something that was a ballot issue, correct? That's the many years ago
Yeah.
because recreation, I mean, that's where, yes.
Recreation issue, yeah.
Yeah, because our recreation department, I mean, it was like all the others. It was just having a lot of, but it was placed on the ballot by city council, and the public voted for it, said, hey, we want this. And it has been a complete game changer for recreation.
For the record, council about killed us that time. I was chair of the election commission. It had to be a paper ballot because y'all were late getting it out.
Well, and I think
Presidential year.
one of the
Not
things
y'all, that was pre-y'all.
that's to remember about this is, and this is part of the story I'm trying to tell on our revenues, is some of them are absolutely restricted. Okay, that means so for instance, a stormwater fee, we're gonna collect a stormwater fee on an equivalent residential unit. This, on the other hand, makes up a substantial portion of our budget, and a lot of the H-tax goes to debt, but it's all consumer driven. Okay, so this revenue stream is subject to greater market trends than we have any control over, and yet it makes up a portion of it. We're reliant on it in a number of ways. So just kind of keep that in mind. But to Mr. Lander, to your point, because it is flattening or has flattened over the past few years, I would speculate, to Mike's point and to the initial point, that there's some inflationary pressures on this. And while the value of your meal ticket has gone up, that 2% has gotten higher, but less people may be going out and availing themselves of that.
Yeah, and I think our total revenue from commercial that, that Reno gives us every year has followed a very similar trend, and I haven't seen any difference in that. And I know business licenses have been year after year increasing as well, too. So I would have to think that it is more related to actual spending than businesses going out of business and that sort of thing. I think it's just a sign of the times right now.
With that Reno here, I don't want to speculate too much on it, but I know just from looking at what's comes through from a development perspective, that when it comes to restaurants and dining options, our addition, what we're adding to what we have in the city for dining is far exceeds what we're losing.
Okay.
Now, it may be that you have restaurants go out of business for different reasons, but I think that, those that move into the market are probably coming in because they're responding to where their pricing is to meet what the current market will allow them to meet.
Makes sense.
A pizzeria coming in rather than, you're losing, I don't know, you haven't lost things like this, but a sit-down dining restaurant, a Chili's type restaurant. We're not losing those that much, but, we have others moving in that I think hits a certain price point, and then that, of course, generates hospitality.
I think our gross retail sales have been over $1 billion for the last
Yeah,
2 to
that's the
3
thing.
years.
Continue to increase.
Our gross retail sales continue to go up, and then you get to, there's a trend. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the 7 Brew has got a line wrapped around it most of the time, any hour, and those are, you get this kind of high turnover, high price kind of coffee that falls under this, and it's just a change in consumer demand, so we're just seeing that.
As we talk about revenues that are restricted, under the hospitality or the accommodations, can any of those dollars be used to incent hospitality development? For instance, with the property that the city owns and, we're trying to market and out towards the new rec center.
My knee-jerk reaction is no from an incentive standpoint, but it does apply to advertising. So what we can do is advertise
Gotcha.
those tourism-related things and then let the market be the market.
Gotcha.
And the last question,
Yes,
just so I'm clear. I know sometimes in my head, I'll lump downtown, but of course Greer is huge. What all businesses or type of businesses pay hospitality tax?
Any business within the city that sells prepared meals, so a grocery store that sells prepared meals would fall under that. And then beverages sold in establishments licensed for on-premise consumption of alcoholic beer or wine.
So is the accommodation, like if I'm a hotel,
That's
they
the
pay
H tax, not the accommodation. The accommodations,
A tax is like hotels, H
A
tax
tax
is
is
everybody
yes.
else.
H tax is prepared
Bids
foods.
and bids.
Short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals, yes. Campgrounds. Impact fees. So in October 2024, this council passed the impact fee ordinance. Again, it's allowed under state code because we have a comp plan, and the capital improvements plan really, as much as anything, applies to that comp plan, but must pass a local impact fee ordinance, which y'all did. The amount of fees must be based on actual improvement costs, and we must publish an annual report. I did that report for y'all in February, I believe. But this was again, a data-driven exercise. We use Tischler-Bice. Tischler-Bice has been kind of the gold standard statewide in doing a lot of these impact fees, and so they were instrumental in helping us craft that. The purpose of those impact fees is to enact or to offset increasing demand on city facilities, full stop. That's just what it is most of the time taxes are paid, not most of the time, taxes are paid in arrears. We need to get out ahead of a lot of these public facilities, and so the impact fee is instrumental in helping us bridge that gap. It establishes the rates and how we collect, and it requires the annual review. As you can see, again, impact fees are, and it's fresh for most of you how we do that, but we do issue, we collect those at the issuance of a building permit, just by way of if you get any phone calls at some point, there'll be folks that, did an initial site plan review back in 2023, and they're going, well, now you're all of a sudden charging us an impact fee. Well, we interpret our code is to apply the impact fee at the issuance of the building permit. Just as an aside. The 4 buckets that they go into is police, fire, public safety, parks, and recreation. Thankfully, as we did our analysis and we looked at the City of Greer initiative, the public safety training facility warranted its own bucket to go into. So it's a little unique, but for us, that is it's a good account to have. Just to kind of give you an idea over the last 2 years where we are from a collections standpoint, recreation's number is typically lower because they're not paid by commercial, industrial, retail uses, okay? So that the recreation is paid by residential developers. Sanitation fees. Again, this is about as clear as crystal. This is, we collect it for garbage, we have to use it for garbage. And so we have those three accounts, cart fees, Spartanburg County and Greenville County. You can see over the past 5 years where we are from a revenue perspective there. Again, this is a restricted fund. What we collect, we turn around, put right back into the program. It doesn't get moved anywhere else but into that account.
Andy, the cart fees, that's for new units coming online and then replacements as well, is that?
That's correct.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And if someone wants to buy an extra,
Say that again.
if someone wants to buy an extra cart,
Got it,
an additional cart,
got it.
we collect that fee off
subsidize.
the permit too, when we do a permit for the house to be built.
Got it.
Do we subsidize this fund in terms of the cost for
Out of the general
collection and,
fund?
yeah.
We have not subsidized a fund. The fund's been operating
For at least.
on its own, but it's currently, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, it's as a deficit right now.
Cart fees, and those, you say those are collected when permits are issued.
Or if you call and say, I want another.
So why is there such a dramatic decrease this year?
So, yeah, there was less housing starts this year, and then also, we still have 2 more months now. It's not gonna make up, you
No.
know, that difference there, but just drop in the housing starts was,
Drop in housing
Okay.
starts, correct.
How large of a drop have we?
We've had a large drop, and we'll provide that permit data. There's one other thing to consider, though, through all this, is that while we've had a drop in single-family residential housing starts,
Gotcha. No.
Yeah,
the
it's
commercial
only-
side of things don't get a cart. So
Right.
as we
Only
do,
applies to those that qualify for the garbage
Gotcha.
service.
that's right. So we'll do an apartment complex, but it's commercial garbage.
Gotcha.
All right?
Or multifamily,
Yes, sir.
or
Any-
gated communities, or
Yeah.
And you can be like
Private
a
streets.
townhome that doesn't get
Yes,
the
sir.
service that
Yep.
is not a rental necessarily.
I want to kind of do a little segue right here as we get into the major funds and talk a little bit about our growth. And I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know or haven't heard or haven't seen on the news lately, but we are right around 29 square miles of population, putting us just behind Greenville, just in area alone. Matter of fact, the Post and Courier article that was out yesterday, we are the second largest city in the upstate of South Carolina. Our population estimates have us somewhere above north of 50,000, and I think those are good estimates. And as of according to the Census Bureau, between 24 and 25, South Carolina was the fastest inbound growing U.S. state. I encourage you to Google it because it will jump right out there and says South Carolina's #1 with a 1.5% annual growth rate. More to the point, I want to make sure that I continue to drive this point home because I wrote inbound on there because of the 46 counties in the state, half of them are depopulating. So we are seeing an intra-state migration as well as an interstate migration. So just kind of keep that in mind. The urbanized areas are going to continue to grow.
Based on the 2025 numbers, we're the 12th fastest growing city in South Carolina.
Now you're showing some swagger again like you did.
So
in the meeting.
just again, before we get into the major funds, I just want to, again, provide this snapshot of our millage rates over the last 20 years. They've largely remained flat until the 2024 debt issuance and council adjusting millage to cover that portion of that 2024 that debt. But we've relied heavily over the years on the growth of the mill. And then, of course, in 2025, you lowered millage by 2 mills. The value of the mill has continued to grow over these years, too. And that has been reflective of our growth and the increase in our assessed value. So again, all of this information I will provide, and you will have is a little bit of a framework on on that. As we get into this a little more, when Brent steps up here and kind of gives you a little bit of color on our debt, this is an important piece of the financial pie that y'all are going to be cutting.
Andy, let me go back one slide, please, sir. When you look at just for folks who may be wondering, 2010, how many mills did we go up? 6 or so? But that, 4,
About 4.
how many?
About,
Looks like about 4.
Okay, well, anyway, if you have questions about that that was a unique time when the economy had tanked and we were trying to make up. We did everything possible, even beforehand. We kind of forecast this happening. The economy just fell off the cliff, and in order to just maintain what we were doing, that was the amount of revenue we had to increase in taxes.
and then the adjustment you see up from 21 to 22 was that 1.2 mil increase to bring us to 99 mills that has been set aside for paving and infrastructure.
Yep.
That's right.
The economy collapsed in 2008, right?
Well,
2009?
it was headed that way. I mean, when you talk about trend lines, you could watch it, and we had already we were following the trends, I believe, and cutting, and we laid off folks, and then it was just no balancing it without, you would have to, I believe we kind of went through the exercise of what if we even did away with entire departments. And of course, that's not even a practical thought.
2009 budget, the fiscal year of 2009 was the budget that was affected the greatest. When we rolled into the fiscal year of 2010, that was the meeting where we set up, and the comment was, Ed went through his presentation at the end, he's like, and that's when he said, by this date, we'll be out of money because of everything was affected, and that's when that action was taking place in that particular budget year.
What was the mill worth at that time?
Let's see, value of the mill, right there. Well, I don't know.
Go back to
It
that
goes back to
slide.
2017.
It wasn't near what it is.
Mathematically speaking, we can look at the assessed
Even in 9
value.
years, it's
Yeah.
tripled.
No, yeah, back in 2010. You know what it was? Chris will find it.
Come on, get
Got
that
it, I don't know it off the
TI-83
top of
out,
my
man.
head. I can probably give, you can continue on, I'll
TI-89.
let you know in
Yeah,
a second.
that'll help.
I can find it.
Yeah,
Jumping into the major revenue sources again, major, minor is really as much as anything an accounting idea, but I think it's important to differentiate that we have some that are, we've got the minors, we've got the restricteds, and we have the majors. And so let's kind of go through what these look like over the last 5 years. First of all, let's talk about the changes in fund balance over the last 5. As this chart shows, that we have always maintained a healthy fund balance. By way of reminder, our internal financial policies require us to maintain 35% of fund balance of our annual budget, okay?
This is the reserve fund you're
This is,
speaking of.
yes, sir, this is the
Okay.
reserve fund. Well, okay, well, Mr. Evans, before you jump into that, I want to say one other thing. Most of the accounts that you have seen so far carry their own fund balance.
Yes.
Okay? That
They're
is not,
restricted.
yes, sir. Either they're restricted, or they're a fund balance that's in, for instance, Fund 9, but it's not a restricted fund balance, but it is a fund balance used in those funds, right?
Yeah.
So this one is specific to 11.
And we've seen a big jump in this last year in the unreserved balance, right?
We did from last year to this year, yes, sir.
Yeah, and that was,
We had a large prepaid that we used before we closed on the 4 Greer projects, to where it kind of, that dollar amount decreased right at fiscal year end.
We prepaid.
on 24, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
We
okay.
prepaid some things.
So 24 would have
And it was
been,
held up, yep, so it was no longer unreserved at that point in time.
okay. Okay.
Paul?
86,000 in 2010.
86,000. A little bit different than 370 or whatever.
323.
323.
2026. Yes, sir, I'm sorry, Mr. Sherwood.
Well, no. You mentioned that our policy about maintaining that 35% buffer. And I believe that we've asked this before, but should that be, instead of a policy, should that be an ordinance that mandates that that's done, or?
I gotta be honest with you, you know, I think the council can turn it into an ordinance, but I think that it is such a bedrock financial principle of this city that so much of even our debt service and how we do plan and finance is predicated on having such a robust fund balance that dipping below that would have a substantial effect, and Brent can probably argue with me or tell me I'm wrong, but would have a substantial effect to some degree on future bond ratings, et cetera. I mean, I think that's.
I think that policy was passed by ordinance, not by
I
resolution.
think it was too.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it was
Okay,
it was
well,
a two-reading policy, not a single reading policy.
Okay, all right.
The other thing to
good.
remember is it's almost twice what GASB standards are anyway.
But the auditors always say 30%. That's what that's how we wound up at the 30%.
They have their own recommendation. As
You're right,
does
and that's where,
GFOA,
yeah, yeah.
And is there a positive, I guess, of sitting up at 52% or whatever that is?
I gotta be honest with you, I think in this particular case, we're catching a lot of growth into that fund balance. And what that does is provide council, from a budgetary standpoint, opportunity to do one-time projects that are non-recurring to come out of that fund balance. And it's almost just a pay-go approach to doing smaller or medium-sized projects,
And that's
quite
part of the
frankly.
policy too, that we use it on non-recurring.
Right. And in the past, we've done exactly what Mr. Merriman said. We've always kind of, it runs in cycles. We will build up above the required amount, a reserve, so that we can go, last time we applied those dollars to the streetscape project. A good many of our reserved, back in 2018, 17, 2018, 2019, we had that reserve in there, and we used, instead of going out and borrowing every single dollar we had, we use some of that money to apply to that project.
Now, this might be a question, but, wow.
Chris?
But,
Oh,
I mean, these are unrestricted dollars, so they can be used to pay off debt as well, right?
they can.
Okay.
No, but one thing that really drove home the point with me, we were receiving the auditor's report, and I don't know where we stood as far as how much of a balance we had in there, but he said, you got to think of it like this. If things just went south, as they did in 08, 09, and 10, if you're carrying a 30% reserve, you can rely on that 30% to operate for the next 3 months or whatever.
And that's how it's restricted.
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, it's restricted for operational
Right.
needs, emergency situations, that it's only used for specific
Yes.
reasons.
Yes.
the 30.
The 30,
Below the 30
the
below
30%.
that
yeah.
35%
Not what's
threshold.
above it,
Okay.
but.
Yes, sir.
So I think that's, as one who saw it tank, I mean, in economies, the economy, it will tank again. I mean,
Yes.
that's not a will it, it's when it. So,
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Since we've got the financial folks for CPW here, and it doesn't necessarily have to be answered today, but I'm curious, what's the pros and cons where we're stacking up the dollars? What's the pros versus cons of taking those extra and having like a millage stabilization trust, something similar to what CPW may have? What would be the decision to go from spending it on one-time projects versus having a fund that stabilizes your taxes?
Because I would respond to that immediately with, that is, what that will end up doing, it will create its own bubble that will have to pop at some point. So really, it would be a matter as if we wanted to utilize that dollar amount over the 35% as some sort of millage stabilization, the growth will continue. We will still need to do the things that we need to do to operate on a daily basis, and we would just be kicking the can down the road on a number of, that would hurt us operationally in the long run.
In my head, that's what I would think, but I just wanted to hear
And
somebody
I
else is
don't, and
smarter.
again, I think the mayor brought this up, and I think he's absolutely right. An apples to pickles comparison between what the charge of a city is from a municipal budgeting standpoint and what a utility provider does and what a private business does. You know, we're just fundamentally different. And I don't think that utilizing that additional 15% or 12% or whatever it is on an annual basis as a millage stabilization slush fund, for lack of a better term, is viable long-term.
Yes.
I think also, and this is getting way out of my lane a little bit, but, you know, with a assessed value on property, that's a stable, I mean, you know, unless you're in a community where that fluctuates, because some going down, some going up, I know, and it's always squeezing the bubble. If your value of your house goes up during a reassessment, it's going down for somebody else usually, or being held stable. But unlike where there's volatility in the market, whether there's pressures for pricing of buying electricity or buying natural gas, you know, that may go up and down on a regular basis, there's a stability in the assessed value of property that, to me, I don't know if it lends itself to that particular idea in this case.
One of the things that I saw happen over past years is that we're still in a growth period like it's never been experienced before, but when it came time to pull the trigger on things that's going to cost money because we have to service the growth. For instance, the fire department. In the monopolization of the fire truck industry, we were able to pay for some trucks up front. And if we hadn't have had those reserves unrestricted, then we couldn't have done that. Now, then you can't, who could have forecast what was going to go on just in that industry that's going to affect us that much? But we were able to do that. So, and there's been a lot of other things too, big stormwater projects that sinkholes and stuff like that. That it's
Reserve is good.
Yes, sir.
yes, it has served us well so far.
Well, there's,
Freedom and
I
flexibility.
guess my question would be that there's the threshold that we've set at 35%, right? And we're far exceeding that right now. To Mr. Sell's point, we use those funds above that 35% threshold for projects and stuff that we deem necessary as a city, which we've deemed like the 4 Greer projects necessary for the city. Or is it the intent to use some of those reserve funds to pay off some of that debt?
Well, we will, yes, sir. I think, in this particular case, we will end up utilizing some of that money to go directly towards some of these projects, specifically the Gross Meadows Fire Station will be case in point. We, from a funding standpoint, we're 12 million over from a cost perspective what we originally had projected back in 2023 as we started the process through 2024 of the plan of finance. So we are going to use some of that fund balance to pay these for some of these projects.
Is it just the time frame that the reason why we're 12 million?
No, there was definitely some inflationary pressures on there, and then of course as we put the Sports and Event Center project into motion, we engaged the community and we did all the things. The project grew, the scope of the project grew, and so we'll talk a little bit more about revenues as it pertains to the Sports and Event Center towards the end of this discussion. But yeah, my intent is to use some of that, to recommend council at some point to utilize that fund balance to go paying off, to pay for these projects.
And I just want to add, and I don't want to get too far in front of Andy on this, but it also gives us the ability to not, when we drew up the bond information, it actually had a cap of an additional, I think, $7 million that we could go up to $100 million. And this would, utilizing some of these funds, maybe give us the ability to not have to, dip into that as much, but I don't know. I don't
Brent will
I
go
don't want
through
to
a
get
lot
too
of,
far
yeah,
in
Brent
front
will
of
go through
that,
the plan
but
of, we'll talk about
there
that
is a
debt service.
combination of things.
Yeah, we'll talk
and I
about that
think
debt
as we
service,
go
but
along,
yeah.
we'll have more information.
When we look at the over 35%, of course, that's a point in time, like whatever day you compile that.
June 30th.
But, so, those numbers change, because I'm sure that there are projects that, maybe they're not the number one priority, and they're 3, 4, 5 down, whatever. And then, so, okay, we've got this, it needs to be done, but instead of doing it this year, next year, we'll do it this year, pull it out of that above 35%. And then that immediately starts dropping that down. So we're not, just to make clear, we're not at the 50-something% above.
Right.
We are, that's just that point in time when you compile that.
And another thing I'd like to point out is a good example that came up the other night during the discussion about City Stadium. One of the things that we have that's ongoing right now is a review of what it's going to take care of City Stadium. And we'll have that information once that's complete, and it's going to give us a number. And some of the numbers that we're hearing so far to do everything we need to do at City Stadium is fairly substantial. In this $6 million range. So that having those kind of dollars available allows us to do a project that would eat up a capital projects budget in a given year without being able to have a reserve to rely on to do a project like that.
Okay, we're going to move on.
Permits and fees, as you can see here, obviously, we're looking to be down in building permits, which subsequently means inspections are down, that's just, again, this industry driven. And while we have anticipated over the last 5 years upwards around $2 million worth of revenue coming in, it's market driven. And so while we've got this outlined as a major fund, it is volatile and it's predicated on larger market trends. Some intergovernmental revenue, that's another piece of this. As you can read, we've got a number of line items that come from various sources, but again, that ends up in aggregate somewhere about $2.5 to $2.75 million worth of revenue that comes in through intergovernmental sources. Franchises and licenses, this is a substantial piece of our budget, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 24%, Chris, is that about right? Is where we get business licenses. Again, market-driven areas of the budget.
Big one to point out is MASC business license FY26. We pretty much get all that in June. So our actuals is that this one is probably the toughest one to project going forward each year because we get it right. Budget's already been passed by the time we get these dollars. So that's why you see that low of an amount. But we will be, in that 5.7 neighborhood. They tell us per the MASC guidelines, they have us budget off the prior year collection. So that's why that dollar amount's so low.
Okay, so we should be close.
We've been strong there, and I'll be honest with you, we've often taken a very conservative approach to revenue projections in this particular line item, because for a number of reasons, but a lot of times it's just we don't want to overly inflate the budget for the sake of it, and I think sometimes we'll see some of those funds rolling into this, into our fund balance, because that is a great source of, I don't want to call it additional revenue, but I think we've taken a conservative approach to doing that so we don't inflate the budget with those numbers.
So cable TV, I would assume is going to keep on trending down.
I think so. It'll go the way of the dodo.
I'm sure Jay looks up at the Sunday ABC licenses and loves that, but that's trending pretty steadily or up.
Mm-hmm.
That's for our hospitality market that sells alcohol on
So
Sunday.
this is not hospitality dollars. This is a separate licensing for
It's a
Sunday alcohol
permit
sales.
fee.
It's a permit
To be-
fee that
It's
they-
different from the 2%
Yep.
hospitality.
It is.
And is the increase there, have we changed the licensing fee, or is it just an increase?
Additional people are selling Sunday
Additional
alcohol.
applicants.
Okay.
Yep.
Andy, I asked you about the fee that MASC charges.
Yes, sir.
Do we get, when they give us that money back, do we get any portion of that fee?
That is a transaction fee that goes directly to a third party.
The entire amount?
That
That's a
percentage
huge amount.
from an account to an account. I know I get you, yeah.
That's a huge amount. Well, that's just
I would
not fair.
remind you, had it not been for the municipal association, that money was going through the state.
Yes.
I understand.
For them to
I know
scrape the
that,
top
but-
off
But the
of,
fee
so.
they're charging is a usury fee, if you've seen it.
It's a
way
convenience
too
fee.
high.
It's almost like a credit card fee.
Yeah, it's
credit.
whoa, it's way beyond a credit card fee.
It's not dissimilar. How's that?
Speaking of state and aid to subdivisions,
Yes, sir.
I know in the years past, we've had issues with the state just ignoring formula. I know right now, everything is good, but any rumors about?
I gotta be honest with you, that is the one, as much time as I spend down in Columbia, that is actually, it's almost becoming sacrosanct. They're just nobody's touching it. As much as we are seeing some aggressive, policy positions taken against cities, this has not been discussed as an option. Now, as well as I do, they'll go and raid whatever fund they can when they can, but in this particular case, I've not heard anything.
It'll be the first on the chopping block when the revenues get in.
That's right.
Yeah. Franchise license, we went through that. Property tax revenue actuals, okay? It's an important thing as we, again, start talking about the importance of millage in particular as a major source of revenue, as the bedrock piece of our revenue picture. You'll see that it makes up somewhere between 55 this year, 55 and 58% of our revenue is going to be coming from ad valorem taxes. That is the stable piece of revenue that we have. That's it. Everything else you've seen is largely, that's not restricted, is largely market-based. General fund budget versus assessed values. A couple more things before I turn this over to Mr. Kozlarek. But as you can see, our general fund budget versus assessed values has been, actually, as you'll see, the percentage of assessed value to our budget as of 2026 has gone down compared to what it was in 2017. But we are not growing our budget as quickly as our assessed value goes. And I think that just goes to show the conservative nature of this council. And while some of the decisions publicly that have come under scrutiny, I still think that delta between our assessed value and what our annual budget is substantial and compared to what that potential for budget growth could be. Millage compared to estimated population, again, take this for what it's worth. But I do think that this is an important piece to just consider as our population grows. We're not proportionately growing our millage rate to meet that demand. And again, I had a good friend of mine use the term, we can stack rifles and compare facts and analysis and make figures be what they are. So I'm going to leave this up to whatever interpretation y'all want it to be. But in this particular case, I think it does have some bearing on our overall financial picture.
Well, I think the top line is what has enabled us to have the bottom line so stable. I mean, we've depended on growth for 25 years.
Well, and not to editorialize, but I would be very interested, and Chris could probably run this analysis fairly quickly between him and Brent, but if you stripped out the debt for the Greer initiative, and we went back to the 2024 fiscal year budget at 99 mills, I think we would still have good growth in our budget, and we would still be able to do what we're doing. The difference is that tax increase of 14 mills in 2024 went specifically to service debt for these Greer projects. And that's where you saw that major jump, call it what you will, it ended up being operational millage, but its functions as debt service. So if you stripped that debt obligation out and then you strip the corresponding millage out, this population would continue to grow and that pink line would be flatter than it is.
So the millage rate is not growing, but the what the millage rate represents, I think, is income, right? Is fit 60%.
Property value.
60% of our income.
Yeah, yes, the millage rate that is the bedrock on which we operate.
Yeah, so I've done this analysis a little bit different. I've shared it with some of the people here of population growth versus overall budget growth, and that line looks substantially different. And I think that's something that needs to be, so the cost to serve per individual has grown substantially.
I think the issue there is cost to serve is typically done on households as opposed to residents. Because if there are 5 residents in one home, we don't visit that home 5 times during the week to pick up the garbage. It's once. So it's most accurate to calculate cost to serve by household.
I'd love to do that analysis, but that, I would
Mike probably
say
knows
that
it.
number's very, well, it's a very consistent number.
Well, one of the things I think you have to look at,
The graph.
and I don't, I haven't done any kind of analysis on cost to serve. So, we could be way out of whack, or we could be right on in line, but you have to look at, I guess you would call it, not outliers, but the things that are different about Greer. And I'll give, the example I'll give you is, and it's not Greer, it's a city at the Myrtle Beach. If you did an analysis of just their budget versus either the rooftops or the number of citizens, their cost to serve is probably, it could be 10 times what ours is.
But their income is completely opposite of ours, right? There's
Well,
entirely
but you're-
hospitality
but-
accommodations and,
No, but if you, no, because I will say their police force is so high, the numbers of the police
Yeah.
and what it costs.
but how's that funded? By hospitality and accommodation taxes, which is
Well,
farm, I mean.
Well,
but I don't know, I'm just saying that there's things that you have that are not standard across the board.
H-tax and A-tax can't be used to fund personnel. They can be used to fund a station
Well,
that serves a beach
H-tax,
community.
I mean, I guess I can go back through my notes, but your unrestricted taxes that businesses bring in, right? For a city like Myrtle Beach is substantially different than us. I mean, like, way
Well,
different.
that's what I'm saying, it's, you've got to, if you're gonna do that, you truly have to figure out what, like the example I gave you, the first high-rise in City of Greer is the hospital, 10 stories down at Pelham. And we are a Class 1 fire department, so there are standards that you meet, and part of the standards is that, okay, when you get to that kind of level, instead of having what used to be just maybe a chief going out there with two engines and a rescue truck, now, got to have 2 ladder trucks, we've got to have 4 engines, all this other stuff. And so then what you do is you say, okay, on an additional ladder truck, besides that being well over $1 million, that's 12 personnel that you add right there. But this just to cover that one truck. And so you've got to look at that kind of thing. And I'm not questioning your analysis. I'm just saying you've got to, there's a lot of factors you've got to put in that, I guess, calculus to get to the right number. Now, one thing that I'd like for us to look at is look at the percentage of increase year over year of our value of the meal. Because, you can't continue to have rapid or just growth without start to have some really significant inflation. And that, I don't know if that's going to, if we want to watch that, just as we do with the hospitality funds, is a leading indicator of what may be on the horizon.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll jump into the millage discussion right now. I'm going to invite Michael up here to kind of give you a little bit of just a historical background and a functional background of how millage is calculated in South Carolina, the effect of Act 388 on millage, and our ability to generate revenue. And really, he's done this more times than not, so I'm going to let him tell the story.
Well, he didn't give me a script, so it could be a dangerous few hours while, oh, I'm sorry, y'all didn't realize that was going to be, will you go back a couple slides?
Here, right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, right there.
Got it.
In the back.
I thought you were driving. No. Perfect. Mayor, if I may, I am going to go way off script for just a second, because as I heard the conversation about the general fund, I thought it was interesting. In my view, and again, these are notes that I wrote while I was sitting here, there really are sort of three reasons that I think that a general fund exists. And I'm the lawyer, not the finance guy, so take that from the lawyer's perspective. The first one is general operations throughout the year. And this, I think Mr. Arrowood sort of touched on this. Because the bedrock of the city's finances are tax-based, most of those taxes come in during about a 2-month period of time, right? Maybe 3 months. Sometime between December and, if they're not going to be late, the middle of January. And if they are going to be late, February or March. Well, you still have all of your operational expenses the other 9 or 10 months out of the year. So when Ed Driggers got up all those years ago and says, this is the date we're going to be out of money, your general fund balance keeps that from happening. Because as your expenses cause that bank account to go down month over month over month, every time you hit the payroll, that fund balance goes down. And when you get that slug of revenue come in, that fund balance shoots back up, which is why the fund balance is measured as of a particular date, and that's typically your audit date. So that's your first sort of reason to have a fund balance. Because if that fund balance ever gets to zero, you can't make payroll, which is what Driggers was talking about. The second reason is it really does act like a savings account in the event you have more than just a normal operational event. You have a catastrophic event, whether that's a hurricane, a tornado, catastrophic fiscal, universal fiscal event, a COVID, whatever it is. That fund balance, just not for operational purposes, normal operational purposes, gives you the savings account ability to say, well, we can still operate because of that sort of life-changing event. And then the third reason, and again, I'm very practical, nature of the upbringing, I don't know, but I view fund balance almost like the difference between making your house payment and when you need to put a new roof on your house, right? You're making the house payment every month. You're not necessarily going to try to pay 2 or 3 or 4 months ahead, knowing that at some point in the next 5 years, you're going to have to put in a new HVAC system. You're going to have to put a new roof on the house. There's going to be some other event that you know is coming that's not really a monthly expense. And yes, you could pay off the mortgage maybe a little bit earlier, maybe some of it. But then when the roof starts to leak, you don't have any money to pay for that. And so those are just, again, some thoughts that hit me while I was sitting there. Why Andy asked me to come and speak, actually asked me to come and speak. That table, and I'm always accused of, if you ask me the time, I will tell you how to build the watch. So I'm going to try not to do that. That table is the answer to what is millage. If you look at the assessed value and you look directly below it at what the millage rate is, all you're doing is dropping the last 3 numbers from your assessed value. It is your assessed value divided by 1,000. That's what a mill is.
Man knows how to make money. Short and sweet, but pay me.
Because you pulled my string.
From there.
Yeah, I know, right? If only it were that simple. So it really is that simple. When somebody says, what's a mill? The word literally just means per thousand. It is literally a per thousand of your assessed value. Why does that matter? Again, I'm sure most of you know this. If you don't, you can pretend you do. If you do, please just play along for another 10 or 15 minutes. The reality is millage was a plug number. It is a mathematical necessity to get you from your property tax collections to your budget. So this goes pre-Act 388, which has been around for, it's hard to imagine. I was literally having this conversation with one of my colleagues this morning on the way over here. Act 388 has been around for over 20 years now. So if you can imagine what budgeting was like before Act 388, and maybe only one or two of you would have been on council then, originally the city came up with a budget to provide services, divided that number by the total assessed value of the city, and that was the millage rate. It was the mathematical necessity of getting from a budget number, getting to a budget number from your total assessed value, which is why when people talk about, well, how much do we collect per mill, that's the inverse of that same ratio. It's the exact same thing. Why does that matter from somebody's taxes? Taxes in South Carolina, fairly straightforward, A times B times C. It's the assessed value of property, whatever that is, times the assessment ratio, it's the fair market value of the property times the assessment ratio for that property. And again, 4% owner occupied, everybody likes to talk about that. Obviously, general commercial, 6%, industrial, 10.5%, fee and lieu of tax notwithstanding. Business personal property, 10.5%. So you're taking your fair market value of those assets, time the assessment ratio that's applicable to those assets, times the millage rate. Again, it's fairly straightforward. When you try to do that for an entire jurisdiction, every single parcel is valued separately. Every single parcel has its own assessment ratio. And you're then taking all of those into an aggregate to get the current assessed value for the city. And then using that number, hopefully, to get to your budget with the appropriate millage. What Act 388 did, which made it more complicated, is because you could not raise millage more than a certain amount, you no longer could effectively set your budget, divide it by the assessed value, and then put the millage on the bill, because that was just a mathematical formula. You now effectively have to decide whether the jurisdiction is going to stay at the same millage it was last year, go up, population growth plus the CPI, or go down by some amount. Remember, Act 388 says if you don't capture the potential increase, you only have 3 years to look back. Otherwise, you lose that potential increase. So, and I'm very cautious about what I say in an open session, but I think an unintended consequence of Act 388 was to encourage local governments to budget to the full amount of their increase or potential increase every year, because if they did not, initially there was no 3-year look back. If they did not, they lost the opportunity to ever capture that millage. And even now, they still only have 3 years to look back to capture that millage.
Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it.
It's the way the school district does it.
And many local governments operate somewhere between we're going to stay flat and we're going to go up to the top of the millage. Very few of them, notwithstanding a reassessment year, very few of them in the other 4 years of their budget cycle actually reduce millage because it's a death nail. They cannot recapture that millage after 3 years. And every year, of course, it's exponential. Again, let's remember the math. 100 times 10% is 110. The following year times 10% is not 10%. It's 11%. So when you lose it for 1 year, you're actually hindering yourself mathematically more than just the 1 year's reduction. And truly, that's it. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions, but the important thing from my perspective is remembering that the mill was originally just intended to be a mathematical plug, because you're not going to charge 100% of your assessed value as part of your budget, right? You're not budgeting $323 million, yes, you're not budgeting $323 million to operate the city. You're operating at some portion of that assessed value as your budget number. And the math just doesn't work without the millage rate. But then because of Act 388, the millage rate wasn't a mathematical necessity. It almost became the target every year for budgeting purposes. And then you're working backwards. They're working all the magic of, well, if we're at 111 mills, what does that mean that we can fund operationally? Because we think at 111 mills, here's how much revenue we will generate. You're almost budgeting kind of in reverse of the way it used to be 20 years ago. I know, I'm old enough to actually remember that. And that really is it.
I was asked by the Municipal Association to testify at the Act 388 hearings, and they obviously helped me with setting that up, but it may have been an oversimplification, but a lot of people still remember it. I went in the room with a balloon that was about this long and walked through the fact that you can change any of these, you can interchange any of these, you can move them around any way you want to, and all you are doing is moving the air around in the balloon. So you're just shifting the burden one way or the other around. You're using the same amount. It's just which way do you want to make it move and how you're going to manipulate it.
Well, and Mayor, newer members of council may not remember the chicken box story. That is a true story. They were literally in the anteroom to the chamber drawing up the math and therefore the language of the bill on the back of the lunchbox that they had just eaten. So, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or just the way the government works in Columbia, I don't know. But 20 plus years later, it creates some of these unusual type situations where local governments tend to be more focused on what's the mill rate, and then let's budget back from that as opposed to the way it used to be, which was what do we need to operate, what services are we going to provide, and how much do those cost, and that dictates the millage rate versus the other way around. Now, the one thing I will say, I do think that mill rates have become more stable over time simply because you have the number going into your budget cycle almost, versus you look for what is it that the policymakers want to see, and we budget to the policy and then figure out the cost and make more adjustment there, versus we budget to how much can we generate from 111 mills. And well, policymakers, if you want us to do something different with that money, and I think, Mayor, you made this point at the beginning, what are we cutting? Because the budget's sort of almost set from the prior year based on your current millage rate.
From a political standpoint, I think I've been involved with the city for a very long time, not just on council, but when Greer was always known as having the highest millage, in the upstate. Oh, it's just so darn expensive to live in Greer. But what people missed, just because you had the highest number of mills, we didn't win anything. That was just a factor in that equation. Now, you don't hear that quite as much now, but, we could, thankfully, the value of the mill is what you're looking at. But, you don't want to be known, you try to avoid the negative press. But that was something that even when I came on council, we I guess, fought that perception. And we even struggled with it during that tax increase during that downturn, that we needed to increase it, that would have put us over 100 mills, is that correct? But then we went
I think we
to,
went to 99. didn't we?
yeah, and then, but the way we did that is, we said, well, let's implement a fee for garbage. I don't think we called it that, whatever we did, but we did it, and our, you know.
It goes back to the balloon. I mean, it's just where you want to squeeze it. And, you know, if you look at the other municipalities, I mean, there is no way to do some chart that's going to have a comparison. I mean, we've talked about this, you know, a lot. Some of our brethren around us have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fees.
Oh, yeah.
That are charged on a taxable basis, just so they're not manipulating their millage, so to speak. So it's hard to say apples to apples and that kind of thing. And I think that's what we realized in that conversation was, you know, we needed to be responsible for what we were doing and what we were providing to Charles's point, because I would anticipate that if, you know, we've got to recognize that cost of service is just basically a turkey shoot in some regards, because if you look at it, I suspect 50% maybe of our community doesn't generate enough taxes to cover cost of serve. Would that be accurate or not?
We know, to Michael's point, we levy 111 mills. That's the confines of the guarantee. We know that we will at some point collect 111 mills of taxes from $323 million worth of assessed value. But beyond that, nothing else is guaranteed. And let's just also, I'm gonna bring this up because I think it's important, is the millage is taxes, municipal taxes, ad valorem taxes are predicated on property values, right? So it's to some degree, a progressive tax. Everything else we do to fill in the budget in some way, shape, or form, be it a fee or something along those lines, end up being naturally regressive, which means for the folks that make less, it impacts them more. So the fairest way to generate for local government, or any government, quite frankly, is gonna have to be this, because you don't have someone on the lowest end of the income level paying a disproportionately high portion of their income for similar services. And therein lies the problem. And that's why I think that it's important to talk about taxation and millage to the degree that it is the bedrock of what we're doing. And I wanted to be able to talk about this to segue into Brent's piece of this pie, because the next piece of this is the entitlement piece. As we talk about what the expenditures are going to be, and when we hand you those budget books about the projected expenditures, the carve out of that is automatically coming from what our debt is. We know that we have debt to pay every year, so that's just not even part of the equation. And the reason, and Brent will talk a little bit about why we've focused on an IPRB as opposed to general obligation debt, is precisely to allow us to use alternative sources of revenue to pay this debt, but it was conservatively estimated on our ability to levy millage, all right? So unless you've got anything else for Michael, I wanted him to give that millage overview for you to see how absolutely vital it is to the sustainability of our ability to deliver services.
Yeah, we didn't even mention all us old guys like me and my wife. We get homestead exemption, so I mean, you know, we're just avoiding taxes.
He didn't go through
We're just avoiding all taxes.
Only
If you always
thing
talk
I've got
about
to
the
look forward
tax
to now.
code, that's a different meeting. But yeah, I mean, from a millage perspective, and I'll be here for obviously more or less however long y'all need me to be here.
We
If there are
appreciate
other
it.
questions or things come up.
Thank you.
Of course.
Take a break?
Let's take a short bathroom break here.
Let me say one thing.
Okay.
This is just in general to all council. I said this to Charles the other day, but as you'll find that people come to you and they'll say, why is Greer such a success? Y'all must just everybody must agree on everything. Nope, that's not it. I mean, that's obvious. We value dissent with everybody sitting up here. I think our biggest reason is, one, we're nonpartisan. We don't toe anybody's, party line. And I don't think that we will, but I think some people want you to be beholden to them. We don't toe an individual's line. We represent our districts, and we represent our city the way we think is best, not based on somebody that's not here in Greer. I read this to council some time back, and it's still, in your decision-making process, I think this is really good. It's called the 3 costs of leadership. And if you're around me enough, you know that I like to hear football coaches talk. They just come up with these crazy things. But this is Kirby Smart, head coach at UGA. He said, the 3 costs. You will have to make decisions that will negatively impact people you care about. You will be disliked despite your best attempts to do the best for them. And you will be misunderstood and not always have the chance to defend yourself. So that's what we're in for, folks. So just know, no matter what we do, it's going to happen. So.
Can you go back to the millage slide, please? Sure. The one, yeah, that one. So I think one thing that really stands out to me there is assessed value grows pretty steadily. That's from housing starts and from reassessment last year. The value of the mill, pretty steady growth. So who pays that bottom line? That's the
property tax
Property-
revenue comes from
property
ad
owners.
valorem taxes.
Huh?
Yeah, ad valorem taxes.
Yeah,
Property owners, be they 4% ratio, 6% ratio, or the
Yeah,
10%.
primary or secondary home or investment home.
Vehicle, all of that is in there.
So from 2024 to now, we've gone up $10.5 million. And from last year to now, we've gone up another $4 million. So that's the burden we put on the citizens.
That's, are you talking about the assessed value?
No.
Oh,
The
okay.
amount the property owners pay has gone up $10.5 million in the last 2 years.
Predicated on the value of the property.
And housing starts and all that stuff. So when we have growth and we have growth of the mill, but we also increase millage, it's, I don't know. I have a moral dilemma there.
If we wanted to unpack what homestead numbers are, is that easy data for us to pull? Like if we wanted to know, if we're looking at these numbers, what portion of that is homestead, what portion of this is X, Y, Z? So let's say, in theory, we decide to go to more of a fee base where we would disproportionately hurt some of the bottom rung. Are those numbers easy for staff to pull together, or not necessarily easily, but it's fairly easy to calculate what those numbers would be?
We'd have to work with the county, and now obviously both counties, Spartanburg and Greenville, talking with them.
So it's more complicated than just
We'd have to parse that out.
We'd have
Yeah.
to reach out and get that data from them.
And Mr. Leonard, to your point, this $35 million represents $35 million of a 58, and that's for 26, a $58 million budget. So in order to deliver services to everyone in this city, $35 million is being paid in property taxes. The rest of it the balance is being paid from the other funds that I had outlined earlier.
Yeah, I understood.
Now,
And we have to realize that appraised value and assessed value are two different things, and then the mill is something different altogether. While it's a mathematical formula of that, So it's not only growth that changes that, but it also is changed by the building that is taking place and the appraised and the assessed value of what's being built as well, too. And that's why you've got Hilton Head, who has a value of a mill, value of a mill in Hilton Head's probably 1.5 million, something like that, whereas in Lake City, it's going to be $100,000. I mean, it is what it is based on the growth of the city. I'm not sure that.
But they could
But
both
this-
be set at 90 mills.
But they can both have 90 mills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the odd thing about talking in millage.
Well, now you're talking about total assessed value, though. So, very different. Millage rate, so like if you just set it all to 100, right? It's very easy to calculate the bottom line at 100, right? You just multiply the third line there by 100. Or I guess, yeah, 100. The assessed value is what are houses worth, right? Houses or whatever, vehicles, houses, whatever. Properties. Things that we're taxing. So the fact that the assessed value of Hilton Head is exponentially higher is because the people in Hilton Head can afford substantially higher assessed values items, not, I think those, I don't know, that's a
Well, that's not
comparison.
the reason. It's not the reason it's higher. It's higher because the property values are higher.
Well, because the
Property
people
is
can
worth
afford
more.
them, right?
Well, that's not the reason it's higher. It's because it's worth more.
That's
Well,
because.
the people that pay the taxes can afford them, right?
Well, they wouldn't be there.
But that's a truism anywhere.
Yes, it's,
So it's,
that's what I'm saying,
it's
that this.
it's based on the demand, which then sets the value of anything. But one thing I would be interested just to see is that now the assessed value is the assessed value of all property. So we have done a great job. Reno in here? Is he gone? I was gonna brag on him. Done a great job of recruiting industry, not retail, but industry, which is very unusual for a municipality to have the industry, the good industries that we do have. But unless there's a fee in lieu of, they're paying, how much? 10.5%. 10.5%. Now, do we get a cut of the business personal property, that you pay the 10.5% on?
Yes, it's in the city limit.
So it would be interesting to see who's carrying the freight. And I kind of suspect it's
Well,
not.
it's always been, they've always subsidized residential.
Yes, that's right.
Well, and they also don't get calculated in, to use Mr. Lander's example, if you use per capita, you can use households, you can use a variety of different things when you start talking about cost to serve. But you don't factor in, you're using per capita, but we service that industry, we service those businesses. So when you use a per capita number, it doesn't really capture the entire amount of service points that you have. And to Mayor's point too, as well, we're not serving a house 5 times because 5 people live in it. We're servicing it 1 time. And, for a home, our cost or our need to put out a fire at my house probably isn't much different than it would cost to put out a fire in, a house across the, that's of lesser value. That service level is the same for each of those houses, regardless of their value.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to capture. I've done cost to serve for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I do not know what conclusion to draw from utilizing a cost to serve model.
There's another factor to that equation that continues, that will drive the cost of service up, and this has been going on for a long time, is healthcare. Used to be, we had Greenville Hospital Systems, independent doctor's offices, which paid property tax, which paid business license fees, the whole 9 yards. with the state of healthcare now, where you have these, well, let's just use Prisma, that's bought up all these other properties and doctor's offices, it's under their non-taxable, we don't receive a dime off that. But all you have to do is pull the run reports for police and fire, and I guarantee you, the fire department's going out to a healthcare facility at least 2 or 3 times a day for alarms and stuff like that. And, you know, that's a free ride. They're not paying anything for the services that, and as healthcare becomes a bigger and bigger component of our area, and it doesn't seem that that's going to change just because of, well, some of its competition with Spartanburg and Greenville. That's something that we'll have to shoulder the burden on unless that policy's changed, and I don't think we're able to do that. But,
Yeah, the thing about it is, we got to realize that the difference between an appraised value and an assessed value, you know, there are a lot of people in our community that have lived in a house for 50 years and not done substantial upgrades or whatever, you know, on it. Their assessed value in today's current market is going to be a third of what it would be. I mean, and, you know, I doubt there's any one of us sitting at this table that would sell their home for the assessed value right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't give it to my kids for that.
Don't like them that much.
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. And, you know,
broadcasting this,
you know, my sister-in-law lived in her house for 50-plus years. She could probably sell it for 5 times what the assessed value is. So, I mean, you know, we got, it's 6 of one, half dozen another in that regard. All right, we're taking a break. 5, 10 minutes, quick one.